First Spin.
Welcome to First Spin, a show where I learn about the Parallax propeller without having any prior programming experience. And rather than do this on my own, I have enlisted the help of two experts.
Yep.
Hi.
I think it's 1.5 experts, but that's just me.
Oh.
You should give yourself more credit, Ryan.
It burns. Did you guys miss us? Did you guys miss
One
us?
and three-quarter experts.
Do you know how long it's been? It's been like nearly a month. 3 weeks?
No, 2 weeks of
2
no
weeks?
shows.
Half
right?
a month without any shows. What is this?
Well,
What is this?
I was
Where?
like
Why are we in the desert? Why
I
are
was
we all?
driving 1,360 miles spread across several days.
How did that go?
It went pretty good.
Yeah.
I got to visit my mom, and then I got to visit some Parallax folks.
Mm-hmm,
Jeff Martin and I had a whole bunch of discussions about Propeller 2 and Compiler 1, compiler stuff. And then I got to go and hang out with Chip at his place for a little while.
Chip, yep, creator of
Propeller 2, Propeller 1,
Yeah,
Basic
yeah,
Stamp,
yeah,
and
yeah.
all kinds of other good stuff.
Yeah.
Probably a good idea not to confuse those three people with one another, too. You know,
Who?
just stay on task as you're making that trip. Because, like, if you show up at Chip's house and you're like, hey, Mom.
Awkward.
Yeah, I don't know if that would happen.
That'd just be so weird.
So, we've been off for 2 weeks, but
We've been thought of.
yeah, we had an email.
We got an email. It's the mailbox.
From Brian.
Hi, Brian. Woohoo! So Brian emailed us saying, I really enjoy the First Spin episodes that y'all, yes, I'm from Texas, cha-bang, produce and look forward to Wednesday to download the latest. I go back and listen to the episodes multiple times. Very, very informative with a lot of helpful information. However, I noticed there hasn't been any new episodes uploaded since number 38. Are you still producing the episodes? I miss my Wednesday fix. Thanks
Yes.
for a great show, Brian.
Yes, we're back. And if we could just get Addie to go back and listen to the old episodes a few times each, we'd probably be doing better.
Yeah, we might be a little farther along.
What do you
Addie.
mean? What are you talking about? Are you kidding me? Have you seen all the
I'm going to
projects?
flush my brain out.
We made
every
zombie
other-
bait. We did a DIY security system. I did all the code for that. All
Well,
of the code for that.
You
I
did-
might have cut and spliced from some of Whisker's code, but I put that code together.
I did the AMIC2 code, but it's not like it's complicated stuff.
No,
AMIC2 is really easy to use.
But you didn't do it that time.
For those two, I did.
No, not for the DIY, the security one. You
Yeah.
left that all to me.
Well, because I'd already done it for Zombie
See?
Bait.
That's what I'm saying. I spliced it. I did a little finger smash, and I think the title for today's should be Finger Smash and also Happy Anniversary to Parallax, but mostly Finger Smash.
Oh, yeah,
I
that's
think
right.
it should mostly be Happy Anniversary to Parallax, their 25th anniversary in business.
Happy Anniversary.
Yeah, so 25 years. I
Today.
mean, that's like,
Yeah.
they've
They're
been in business about as long as Addie's been alive.
Hey. I'm
Yeah.
a little older than that, okay? I have
Only
had
a
life
little, though.
experience.
You're like 3 when they started doing this.
Life experience, okay? But you're right. Happy birthday to Parallax. It's their 25th anniversary of existence, which is crazy because I feel like I've known them for a very long time. So I actually, before we started the rest of this episode, I wanted to see where you guys first heard of Parallax.
Let me think.
And it's like, all of its awesome
Okay, I
stuff.
can answer this. For me, it was growing up, we got Nuts and Bolts magazine.
Yep.
My dad's a tinkerer and I'm a tinkerer.
Mm-hmm.
And almost every single edition on the back, there'd be a really big Parallax ad. And this is before the propeller days, obviously. It was all, basic stamp. I think up through like, what was that other chip? The Javelin? I think they just started doing that one the last time that I considered myself, young and reading Nuts and Bolts.
You're still young, Whisker.
Okay. So yeah, that was where I first heard of them. The first time I heard about the propeller
30s going on 80s. Yeah.
was when they did the design contest for the propeller when it was fairly new. And
Were we together at that point?
Yeah.
That was the first time?
Yeah, and that's the first
you
time
had big aspirations.
The first time I picked up a Parallax product was then.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd always been drooling over them, even since I was a kid, because they always had such cool stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, I similarly, I've been aware of Parallax for a really long time, mostly from their advertisements and drooling over wanting to get like the Bobot and other stuff when I was younger and couldn't afford it. But the first thing I ever owned of theirs was I went into a Radio Shack and they had a Bobot on sale. And I think it was like in 2005, 2004, something like that.
Okay.
And I bought it and put it together and was making it drive around doing basic stuff with the basic stamp 2 that was on there. And, it had the serial port instead of the USB port. Luckily, I still had a serial port on my computer back then. And then a few years later, I sort of rediscovered them when I bought the Hydra game system. Mostly because I was like, I want to make retro games. That'd be kind of fun. And I got the board and it had a propeller on it. And I started reading the book that came with it. And it's talking about this, really cool microcontroller that can do video all in one of its
Which
little
I have
processors.
not yet gotten to.
Yeah, well, because it kind of takes PASM to do it.
Yeah.
So
what's up with that?
So I got into going to the forums and everything. This was like around 2007-ish time frame. So the propeller had been out for a little while, but I had just discovered it. And so I started going to the forums and hanging out and learning stuff from the people there and buying other Parallax boards because I had a decent job and was making decent money, so I could afford to buy it at that point. But that's how I got into the whole Parallax and the propeller and whatnot.
Very cool.
So, and then I finally went to the expo, the unofficial propeller expo,
which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was really cool.
In 2010 is when I went to my first one, and then 11 and 12, we both went to the 12 one earlier this year.
Yes, we did. Woohoo! Cool.
So Eddie was exposed to it for quite a while because I was tinkering with it, but she didn't really
But
get into it
I didn't
much.
even touch electronics for.
You
that was what,
you pretended like it was the plague.
No, that was 2008. 2008 when Whisker and I first started looking into the design contest, and that's when I was first quasi exposed. I mean, Whisker would tell me about the architecture, of like how the shared RAM and the round robin, all that cool stuff was going on, and I paid attention for about 2 seconds, and then my eyes would glaze over. Oh my, how times have changed.
Why am I not surprised?
What can I say?
I think she gets why I was excited about it.
Yeah, well, it's very elegant architecture.
Yes.
That
was the first thing I said to Chip when I met him. I was like, you know what? The propeller is extremely elegant.
And he said, thank you. I'm trying to think as to when I actually first got interested in it, though. Was it just to make LEDs blink? I think the demo board got me into the propeller.
I think it was the flashy blinkies.
It was the flashy blinkies. Can't lie. I'm not sure how I started programming exactly, but I'm sure First Spin had a big.
Well, it started because we were all on Skype one time, and somebody we know, Travis, asked us to. He said we should just record this conversation and make it a podcast.
You're right.
Because we were explaining programming, the very beginnings of it, to you, and that turned. Whisker jumped on that, and
yeah, that's how Zombie Tech got started. And then once we were rolling with that, we thought maybe Parallax would like us to do one for them too, specifically for the prop. And now we're like,
and now we get people emailing us, and it gives me warm fuzzies.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
So that was how many episodes ago? I guess 39 now, because we're doing the 39th, right?
Yeah.
And if you
Oh, we
like
missed
more
a couple
information on like how they got started with this whole Parallax thing, you can check out our YouTube channel. You can find it at tymkrs.com. We did a video interview with Chip and Ken Gracie, and they're talking about what got them into this.
Partly, and then just some silly stories from when they were kids. So
It's all related.
You know, some people didn't know they were brothers. I was surprised.
I believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense, but
Well, it's not like they put a big stamp on the front of the building, you know?
I'm with brother. Okay, anyway, so happy birthday, Parallax. Thank you, Brian, for your kind words. And if anybody else would like to send mail, it will be read on our little mailbag spot here on First Spin. But we do have actual work to get to because... So I was like bored one day, right? And I wanted to get as many modules into one, like interfacing with one prop as I possibly could.
You stopped at 3 though.
No. See, I'm kind of glad I did that though, because when I got all of them on there, like first, you know, some of them need a bajillion wires, and then they need like capacitors and resistors and stuff. So I was like, well, I realized that of all of these, there's like 3 of them that are I2C, you know? So I was like, well, I've never actually used I2C the way I2C was meant to be used. So why don't I try that?
So I2C allows you to hook multiple devices up to the same pins and share the data pin, you know, your processor pins.
Right.
So you don't use up all your I/O pins.
Right.
And it uses a protocol to determine which device you're talking to.
Right. So that was the freaking miracle of it all, because, okay, and let's do a quick recap of I2C for those who don't remember what it is. I2C is this like amazing thing where you have this master and a whole bunch of slaves, right? So this master is your like microcontroller.
Well,
right?
It's actually anything can be a master and anything can be a slave. But generally your microcontroller is the master and
like
the
all
devices
right.
that you plug into it are slaves.
Right. So in this case would be like the altimeter, the compass, and the gyroscope. Right. And those are your slaves. And
all that really determines is who is driving the clock. So the master drives the clock pin high and low to signal data pins going, you know, data going by. Right.
So there's a serial clock line and a serial data line. The clock line is the line that determines the timing for all of your slave modules, and then the data line is where they can all talk to the master.
Right. And the master can talk to the slave via the data line also, because you have read and write operations.
Yeah, well, it kind of has to, because it has to be able to say, okay, I want so-and-so to answer. And then so-and-so will when those clocks come around.
Right. So there's an extra little bit of stuff that goes along with I2C, which is the start signal and the stop signal. And all that is where you hold the clock line high and then take the data line from high to low. That's a start operation. And then immediately, you know, so you hold the clock line high, you bring data from high to low, and then you start clocking low and manipulating the data to what it should be. And as you clock up and down, that's when the data starts going through.
Okay, wait a minute.
So when the clock is high, during when you're traveling, when you're actually reading and writing data, the data is only assumed to be valid when the clock signal is high. When the clock signal is low, you change your data to what you want it to be, and then you bring the clock signal back high again, and that means the data is ready for the device, the slave device, to read, or the master to read back from the slave.
But I thought the clock signal is like just a drum beat.
It is, but it also is signifying that the data is in a valid readable state.
Interesting.
When the clock is high, you can read the data at that point.
Interesting.
And when the clock is low, the data is allowed to change to the new value.
Okay. So
it's very clever.
Yeah. Well, and so we might go see this in the code, but essentially what I wanted to do was get all these I2C modules working together and
on the same bus.
On the same bus.
On the same 2 pins.
Or 2 pins. which is a miracle because I have on one side the breadboard with like a crap ton of wires, and on the other side there's like one wire to power, one wire to ground, one wire to pin 0, and one wire to pin 1 for 3 modules. It's
and
awesome.
In the show notes, there'll be a link to articles that he's done on,
Of course,
doing the wiring and
Right.
the code
And
and all
showing
that.
some example code, yeah.
Right. So, I thought we could go over the code. Now, the code from my first, the first article was all funky. Like, it worked, kind of, but it would change every 2 seconds.
Right.
You know, like, it would change even if I wasn't changing the...
Even faster than that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was because of the thing that we figured out.
Right, which we'll talk about. So,
and I think Eddie now understands that a little bit better because she understands that only one device on the bus can actually talk back to the microcontroller at any one time.
Right.
I wish it were as simple as saying, okay, start module 1. Read module 1.
It kind of is.
Really?
Whereas you're spawning off
like it's
one
not.
of them to constantly run in the background and constantly, there's a cog out there constantly talking to it.
And so it was utilizing those clock and data pins continuously, and then your other code was
getting all sorts of scrambled.
Trying to do its take turns thing, but failing because the altimeter was going off in the background. But the way it works normally, if you have everything set up correctly, like we figured out, is that you basically talk to each device in turn.
Wait, so when I said alt pound background, I was actually spawning off a separate cog?
Yeah.
For the altimeter module had its own cog running off in the background.
Yeah, inside the altimeter driver code that you include, when you tell it to start in the background, it actually spawns another cog to run in the background, continuously reading the altimeter module and updating the values.
I didn't know why you kept saying I was spawning off cogs because I didn't do a cog news. So,
right.
Okay. Anyway, so let's look at the code. Okay. So here we have. I had a difficult time, and this is what I call my finger smash code, because I essentially took the kickstarts of the altimeter, the gyroscope, and the compass modules and put them all into one big pile of goulash.
Right.
Spaghetti code.
Spaghetti code. Aww,
so you took like all the different con sections and put them all up at the top into one.
Right.
And all the different var sections and then the various
one.
And then the various pub sections you
just mashed them all together. Them.
But then the main one, you made a combination of them start all their startup things and then the loop things.
Correct.
And it mostly kind of worked except for you had that altimeter background thing.
Right. So, okay, so if we look at the code, object PST is just the full duplex serial, which we talk with the serial terminal, no problem, we know that. Altimeter had its own object, which I thought it was kind of the trouble child because it had its own object, but, since that's the only way I know how to interface with it, I'm like, okay, whatever. We'll just do it. Clock mode, we know. Clock freak, we know. And then the SDA pin, SCL pin, that's where we set the pins. And when you do, I think is it the gyroscope?
It's
the altimeter, probably. So with the altimeter, you have to change the pins in the object to match the pins that you're actually going to use because they're quote unquote hard coded in the altimeter object.
So the altimeter object has some predefined pin setups it can use based on the passing in the quick start or whatever values, but you went in and made your own that matched 0 and 1.
Right. And it's very easy. Like
two modules.
If you just scroll down and look a little bit, you'll see where to change those numbers.
Right.
And then
you have all these command bytes.
Yeah.
Read it. So read and write here at the top are for the gyroscope.
Right.
And all these control registers are for the gyroscope.
Yeah.
And then later on you have this read data and write data, which are for the compass.
Could I have just put those into one? Or
No,
no?
because they're different values. As you notice, the read and write are D2 and D3, which are a combination of the command byte. The address of the gyroscope is actually the D2,
Uh-huh.
and then the bottom bit is 0 for write and 1 for read. So it becomes D3 when you're doing a read, and it's D2 when you're doing a write. But the address is D2.
So D2 is hard coded on the gyroscope module.
Right.
What if you wanted to have more than one of them? Would you have to have 2 buses set up then?
Yeah, you'd have to set up 2 different sets of pins.
Mm.
Some I2C modules allow you to configure their address that they'll respond to. It just depends. So you'd have to like go through a procedure to set up each one's address at the beginning, but it just depends on the I2C module whether or not they support that or not.
Do you know what the altimeter's address then is?
Well, yeah, if you go look in the altimeter code, up at the top of it, it has a section where it shows its read and write, and it actually does it as the device address, which is EC,
Huh.
and then device read,
Oh, I see.
and then device read has the 01, which means so when you OR that 01 with EC, it becomes ED, and that's a write. So it's just 2 different ways of doing the same thing.
Interesting. Okay.
And then and then your compass is at 3C for the compass. So all 3 of these devices have different addresses, and that's how you're able to talk to them. Is when you do a command, whether you do a read or a write, you always have the address as part of the read or write command to the device. So then when you do your start procedure, they all listen until the address goes by, and then they don't respond if it's not their address.
I see.
Right.
Okay. And then there's a whole bunch of control registers and some other information that's required for communication with those specific modules.
Yeah. And then some variables for holding.
Yep.
I don't think we really have time to go through this line by line, but
right. Well, we're kind of skipping over stuff. So the only thing we really need to get through here is the main now. So you start up your serial terminal, and then these first few commands here are setting up the gyroscope to be in the correct mode. It's similar to the gyroscope kickstart. And then you have a command here, the set CONT, which is for the compass module to put it into continuous output mode. And then you do the code to start up the altimeter. Right. And originally you had it in background, but you change it to foreground, and that just means that every time you read it, it'll sample new values.
Right.
And then you drop into your repeat loop, and you just take turns reading each thing and printing out the data.
So then I have a quick question, because the one thing I did delete from one of the other modules was like the start, the pry start, pry stop, pry send, and pry receive.
Right,
functions.
Because you only need one of those for all of them, right? So
these are like the 4 main I2C commands?
Right. So start and stop are always the same for every I2C device.
Okay.
And send and receive are always the same. The main difference is the value, right, that is passed as the first byte in your send or receive sequence, which is the address and either whether or not you're reading or writing. So when you do a send, you're sending that D2 or 3C or EC, which are to say, I want to write a value out to one of those 3 devices, and then you pass the value as the next thing.
What do you mean I want to write a value?
So whenever you're going to talk to an I2C device, you actually end up sending 2 bytes out. Right? Or sending a byte and then receiving a byte.
Okay.
And the first one is the first byte that you send out is the device ID and whether or not you want to do a read or a write.
Addie?
Okay. Yeah.
That was my first byte.
Oh.
and then the next byte is the actual data. If it were a write, then the next byte is the actual data byte that you're sending. And depending on what that byte is, it might have an additional byte afterwards because you might be setting a register. So you send it which register you're going to write, and then you send it the data to put in that register, right? And then if you're going to do a receive, like you're going to read a byte out of the thing, then you would send the read command and then receive a byte and do the receive function, which you kept, which is a little different there. It reads in a byte one bit at a time and then gives it back to you.
Okay, so let's make this a little more easy on my head. Let's say you want to get information from the compass. Can you go through how you would, what like the sequence would be?
Okay, so if you're gonna, the first thing you have to do is tell it that you want it to do something, right? So the set continuous is setting the compass into continuous output mode.
Right.
So the first thing it does the start operation, which tells it to start the I2C bus to start.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sends the write data value, which was for the compass, which happens to be a 3C, right? Which is the address of the compass. Okay. And then the next byte that it sends is the mode, which is the register for setting the mode inside the compass, which in this case happens to be 02. So the second byte in there is the register. And then it sends, as the third byte, the value to stick in the mode register. In this case, it happens to be 0, which puts it into continuous mode. And you would find that out by reading the data sheet for your particular module, what values to put in the registers.
Okay.
Okay. And then it sends the stop. Okay. And that means that completed the command transaction. It sent a write to the 3C, which was the compass. And then it said, I want to set the mode register. And then it said, set it to 0.
Yeah. No,
okay.
But yeah, okay.
So that put it into continuous mode.
Right.
So then when you want to read from the compass, you have to tell it where you want to read from.
Okay.
Right? So it uses the set pointer command.
Yeah.
And the set pointer is going to write the same thing. It's going to write the write data.
The address, essentially.
Thing.
Yeah.
It sends the write data byte, which includes the address of the compass.
Okay.
And then it sends the register, which is out XMSB in this case. Okay. Right? Which is the 03 value. And then once it's set the pointer, it immediately then does a read operation.
Okay.
Right? So it does in your code it's called get raw. It's kind of jumbled up here. So it then does a read data command, which is the same thing. It has the address, but it has that bottom bit is turned on, which means it's going to do a read.
Okay.
Okay. And because we set it into continuous mode and we set it to the out X register, we now need to receive 6 bytes in a row, 2 bytes for each axes, X, Y, and Z on the compass. And that's what it does here in the get raw. It receives a byte and then receives another byte and combines those two together and to make one value. And then it receives 2 more bytes and combines those together. And then it receives 2 more bytes and combines those together. And then it sends out the stop because it's done. So the sequence was that it wrote out a command to say, here's where I want you to set the register to. And then it wrote out the command to say, I want to read now. And then it starts reading from there.
Could I just have put the set pointer into the get raw pub before?
You could have put it right in front of the start line in get raw. That would have worked. It's just that they had the Kickstart code had it broken up into different parts. It's just somebody's way of segmenting the code into modules that they like to use.
So you got all that sorted out? Addie?
Oh, we may spend another week on it. I don't know yet, but
All right. Well,
I
for
will
this
see.
week, we're out of time.
Yes, unfortunately. Too much celebrating.
But you got your stuff working.
Yes. And I will be sure to update the code
And it
for
only
those.
took 25 years.
Yes.
And you have to do another blog post saying Finger Smash 2, and
Finger
it
Smash 2.
works now.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you guys for doing this. And thank you all of the listeners out there.
Yes, thank you guys.
We appreciate that you guys
The love.
appreciate it. Yeah.
It was awesome to get an email. We need to get more.
Yes, I agree.
All right. You guys can find this show every Tuesday or Wednesday if you're in Texas, evidently. At firstspin.tv, there's an RSS feed there. You can sign up to automatically get the show through your iTunes, your smartphone, whatever you do. You can also listen to it right on the website. Just push play.
Yep.
It's real easy. All right. That's it for us for this week. We'll be back next week. Until then.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.